this kind of behaviors that this new African youth does not want to allow. This African youth, they have understand the entire games and the own of this game, how they play their mafias. So this African youth, they have understand that nope, we are not gonna let this pass. We are not gonna allow this kind of mistake which our elders and our fathers or our forefathers have committed before. We have to do things differently. This African youth, they became as a barrier between this Europe and the West that are trying to recolonize Africa continent once again. Things have changed around. The US, they are no longer having that easy access in Africa soil. The children of Africans, they have understand that we have to stop this now before it's too late. And this end up putting the fire in the mountain.
This weekend, the military junta running Niger announced it was kicking out U.S. forces conducting operations to counter ISIS and al-Qaeda in the region. This comes on the heels of reports that Niger is negotiating security-related deals with Iran and Russia.
Is Africa a threat to the Western? Of course, this has become a reality question which the Western, in their plans, as they are planning to recolonize Africa again, they have to consider all this. Do you know why? Because they have begun to understand that this African youth, they have also start understanding how these things works around. They have access to the informations, they have access to the internet. They can Google and find out what are the plan of these Westerns and how they are planning to start everything.
The Russian Federation had their playbook. They had their passing game through their disinformation campaign.
Even though the Western medias, they've been using their medias in order for them to hide the truth from Africans, well, they make on this small mistake by leaving this small window to Africans, which the Africans, they manage to make their own research by using their devices and connect to the internet and dig even more information and make different research and get to share it in different platforms as we are doing it right now. These are the things that have made the West plans to start failing right now in Africa continent.
Turn on your TV and you will see the Western media houses highlighting how violent black people are. Believe us, whenever you will hear about violent fights or murders, you will only see black people being the accused. Why is this the case? Does it mean only black people are criminals? Well, the answer is a strong no. But very wickedly, the Western media has shaped the perception of Africans and black people living throughout the world. Even if people of other races and classes are bad and violent, the Western media tries to establish that black Africans are the source of all problems.
Even though they are using their big medias in order to deceive Africans and lie to them, well, Africans, they are still able to understand what needs to be done because they are taking the news which they believe that it can help them and they reject what they think. They don't think that it's going to help them.
Show the beautiful picture of Johannesburg on the media. They don't show a beautiful picture of Cape Town on the media. Durban, I've never seen anything beautiful about Durban. When people show things in the media, they're always shown in the negative light. So when something about Africa is talked about, it's normally bad, it's normally violent, it's normally something about the country or something that just happened where a disease broke, and it's never good. So your perception is what people have forced you to believe. So until you get the heart to go, I'm going, I want to see for myself, you don't know. So all I know is what the news says. So in my mind, I'm like, hey man, I'm not trying to go over there and get kidnapped. It's a reality. It's not me saying it to hypothetically say it. I'm saying from what I've seen.
They are now well informed that Africans, they are well aware of what is happening because they have their own way of finding the informations, and that is the reason why they are standing against us right now, which is a good thing after all, because Africans, they can be able to find their own way out of all this. In the reality, the West, they are finding it very hard for them to justify their presence in Africa continent. They don't have any reason that they have to justify the presence of their military base all over Africa continent, because they are now facing the young ones who are full of energies, and they are asking a lot of tough questions to understand what is these people doing here when we are having all these things happening in Africa. We don't need the presence of these people. These African youth, they are very angry and decide to start kicking out this military base of the Western, which are located in Africa continent.
U.S. military kicked out of Niger in humiliating exit. In a humiliating turn of events, the U.S. military has been unceremoniously kicked out of Niger. The announcement came during a joint press conference in Niamey, the capital, where the American and Nigerian militaries laid bare the details of the forced departure. Nigerian Colonel Major Mamman Sani Kiyau triumphantly announced, "This June 7th flight by the U.S. Air Force's C-130 Globemaster III from Niamey, Base 101, marks the start of a series of several wide-body rotations for the repatriation of personnel and equipment in accordance with the Niger Agreement." Both countries signed an agreement on May 19th for the withdrawal of American troops. Since then, more than 269 items out of 946 and several tons of equipment have already left Niger, according to Kiyau. U.S. Major General Kenneth Ekman feebly attempted to save face by announcing the establishment of a joint committee to facilitate the coordination of the disengagement process. This committee is a clear sign of the disarray and incompetence that has plagued the U.S. mission. Prior to this ignominious retreat, over 1,000 U.S. troops were stationed at 2 bases in Niger, tasked with the dubious mission of spying on various militant groups in West Africa. Niger's decision to end its partnership with the U.S. was a direct response to Washington's condescending attitude and threats of reprisals, as pointed out by military spokesperson Colonel Amadou Abdramane in March. This scathing criticism of U.S. diplomacy and military strategy in the region further underscores the complete and utter failure of American efforts. Adding to the embarrassment, Niger also expelled French troops in 2022 after an 8-year partnership, accusing Paris of being unable to suppress terrorists in the region. The U.S. now finds itself in similar disgrace.
This weekend, the military junta running Niger announced it was kicking out U.S. forces conducting operations to counter ISIS and al-Qaeda in the region. This comes on the heels of reports that Niger is negotiating security-related deals with Iran and Russia.
When we're listening this kind of conversation taking place inside the Senate cabinet in the United States of America, this is more clearly showing that Africans, they are now hating them where it hurts the most, because they are being affected by the reactions of Africans who have to kick them out of their countries. Now they are sitting over there and talking about all this and start raising up some reasons, talking about Russia and China who are coming to take over Africa continent instead of them. Through this same conversation they were having, they were discussing about the crisis which is ongoing between Niger and the United States of America.
Focusing on Niger, clearly we bet big. Okay, we bet big on Niger, and right now we're at a point in which we either want to double down or we want to fold.
This Senate, they are talking about Niger. If like African people who are in Niger, they don't have a word to say in all this, because they were talking kind of like in parables, like discussing it and thinking that the truth won't come out and people of Niger won't be able to understand. We don't need them in order for us to understand what they're up to in Africa continent. We don't need their media for us to be informed of what are their plans, because the fact is that the people of Niger, the young people of Niger, have stand on their own to send a very loud message to the Western.
It appears Niger will soon join Mali, Libya, Sudan, Mozambique, Burkina Faso in welcoming Russian troops and mercenaries into their country.
Here is the truth of this crisis that is happening between Niger and the United States of America. The youth of Niger don't need their media to be informed of what is happening. They don't need to beat around the bush. The fact is that they are being accused, saying that Niger is doing business with Iran and Russia, which is not even the fact, because this is just one of the excuses that these people are being hurt, because they can see that Niger have rejected them and try to have some new partners that they can work with and benefit from all this, instead of them understanding that they are failing to do so. And that is where you see them, they are now having that anger toward people of Niger. We are talking about the same people who had come and promised heaven and paradise in Niger, in Africa continent, but they have failed to do so. And the youth of Africa continent, they have begun to understand this for some times now, that all the words that comes from them, it has nothing to do with what we are seeing here as the reality. So they are not able to handle that.
At the end of the day, it is critical for the U.S. to have a footprint on the continent.
After listening to this kind of speech, how can you blame these African youth that are revolting toward the Westerns? These Africans who have understand that this kind of lies, it will not gonna pass with our generation.
We want to support our democracy and our values, but two, we're trying to be friendly with this junta. And it's leading to a point where we have a kind of a judgment of Solomon, and that we're splitting the goals. And what we don't want is it to leave us with nothing, because we know that nothing will be filled by China, by Russia, by Iran. We also know that the VEOs, the violent extremist organizations, are not going to stop in Niger. There's going to be consequences throughout the Sahel. As the DNI put out its annual threat assessment I think it was recently.
I can't believe this. Let us be honest. These are the same people who are trying to fight over Africa continent, all because of the mineral that Africa do have. During the World War II, we all know that they use Africa minerals in order for them to build up their weapons and different fighting tools in order for them to defeat one another. This is the same strategies that these people, they want to do right now. And they're trying to do all this not in a diplomatic way, by approaching African countries with that due respect in order to negotiate and do a benefit of win-win. No, they want to come and recolonize Africa by force. They want to come and impose their leadership on Africa continent in order for them to have whatsoever they want, in order for them to go and fight other nations out there. They want to do this, obviously, in the previous conflict which took place between Niger and the United States of America. This time again, the big propaganda took place, because we know that the Westerns, they are very good to do bad propagandas in order for people to believe them out there as the victims and reject you as one who's supposed to be the victim. The fact to all this conflict between Niger and the United States of America, it all started like this.
This weekend, the military junta running Niger announced it was kicking out U.S. forces conducting operations to counter ISIS and al-Qaeda in the region. This comes on the heels of reports that Niger is negotiating security-related deals with Iran and Russia.
See the kind of propaganda these people, they can use. They are doing this, and they will take it, they will release it through their medias, and they will make it the whole world know about what is happening. And then what people of Niger have to know from all this is that no, Niger, they have signed some secret contract with Iran, so that they will sell their uranium to Iran, and Iran is going to develop their nuclear bomb project. See the kind of lies that these people, they can come out with. It is true, these people can lie. They even went far to accuse Niger, saying that they are doing some dark dealership between Niger and Russia. But that is not something that people of Africa should not buy, because we know how these people operate. The truth is that
La présence américaine sur le territoire de la République.
The American presence in the territories of the Republic of Niger and Talgal is violated all the constitutional and democratic rules which would make the people sovereign. In particular through these representatives Yoloui, be consulted for the installation of a foreign army on national territories.
Territoire national.
What did really happen in order for us to get to this point? Well, a delegate diplomats from the United States of America shows up in Niger, which is one of the African country in Africa continent, in Africa soil. They show up over there by denying all the protocols that they're supposed to follow as foreigners who have to travel to another foreigner countries. They shows up in that country, of course. They shows up in terms of saying that no, we have our military base over here and we are here for some service or for some missions. Once they seated inside, they end up imposing, calling for a meeting to meet the president or the military president of the Republic of Niger, that they want to have a meeting with him. They did not book for any appointment. They did not follow any protocols. But just because they believe that the United States of America, they think that it was a good idea for them just to show up how they feel like. Well, we don't blame them after all, because this is what they are used of after all this time. They can show up at any time of the night they want. They can meet you whether it is in your bedroom or in the hotel rooms, wherever they feel like. They were used to this kind of things, and we saw how some presidents of African presidents welcoming some delegate from America, secretaries, defense ministers, whatsoever. They welcome these people in the red carpet. Well, unfortunately, that was not the case this time, because they are finding another new generations of African youth who want to do things differently, who don't need to welcome you without you following the protocols, who don't want to accept and welcome you in their office if you do not book for any kind of appointment.
Sous la forme, l'arrivée de la délégation
In
américaine
form,
n'a pas
the
respecté
direction of the American delegation did not respect diplomatic heads. Indeed, it is in illiterate ways, by verbal notice, that the American government informed the Nigerian government of the date of arrival and the composition of the delegation rooms, as well as the Nigerian authorities to meet without precision any date of its visit. It is therefore out of courtesy and following our military mission of hospitality that the government reported the American neglect.
réussi la délégation américaine.
The Niger government had to come and tell Americans that you guys, you are being illegally in our soil. But after all that, Americans, these American delegates, they still had the courage to call for the audience, saying or suggesting that they want to see the head of the state, which is the President Abdourahamane Tiani. Wow, what a shock. What can we say? This is an Americans who are in other foreign land and imposing to see the head of the state, even though they have arrived in this country illegal, yet they have the courage to call for the head of the state to meet them. These American delegates, they did not have any kind of appointment with the President Tiani. They did not book for any kind of visit. Even though they are illegal in this country, they still have the guts to call for the president to go and meet them. Wow. Of course, it is how they are used to do with this kind of things. The Western, they always want to have something to say on African leaders, because most of these African leaders used to be their puppets. They were used to all these kind of things. But unfortunately, in this case, things seem to be very different from what they were expecting, because they thought that we can arrive in Niger illegal, we can sit down, we can call for their president is going to come to us and hear to what we have to say to him. Unfortunately, that could not happen with this president of Niger. We all know that for all these